morning, and welcome to the September 10th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. I am Blanny Miller, Chair of the Commission. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda today? Seeing none, I'd like to make a quick comment about an upcoming comp plan amendment regarding the South Street closure. We had previously anticipated that that comp plan amendment would appear on today's agenda. However, we anticipate that it will now appear on the agenda for our next regular meeting on September 24th. Since it's not on our agenda today, we should not deliberate the substance of the case. However, I've received many questions about the Planning Commission's role in this case, so I just wanted to take a quick moment to explain some procedural aspects. On September 17th, the City Council will vote on the street closure at their meeting, and Council may close the street without a comp plan amendment. So if there are many ways that meeting could go, but if they do vote to leave the street open, then a comp plan amendment to remove the street from the comp plan, street plan, it might still appear before us, it may not, but it might. But I don't know that there would still be a need for that. If the City Council votes to close the street, then our comp plan analysis would be whether to also remove it, to recommend also removing it from the street plan within the comp plan. And if we were to not remove it from the comp plan, but the city were to order the street closed, then whenever the city went to develop the property, since it was still on the street plan, the city would be required to reopen the street at that time, which is a perplexing outcome and probably an unlikely one at the City Council level. So for those reasons, I am glad that we are going to get the City Council's decision on this matter at their September 17th meeting before we hear it at our next meeting, and we can then hear it at that time. But I've received many emails and phone calls and questions about that, so wanted to explain our role in it at that time. And I'll plan on repeating this also again, obviously, whenever it does come before us and appears on our agenda. Are there any additional questions about that at this time? Is that it? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Then we will move on to committee reports. We have 2 items under committee reports, and I will turn to Committee Chair Bennett for the report of the Text Change Committee. Oh, I'm sorry, Committee Chair Alford, report of the Text Change Committee.
That's right, we're in flux, it's okay.
Yes.
All right, we met on August 21st to consider 2 items. We had TC 424, the Temporary and Accessory Emergency Shelters Text Change, and TC 624, Raleigh Water Public Utilities Design Manual Update. And we had a good discussion about each. The ADU emergency shelter text change allows the city to set standards and allow for temporary emergency shelters, such as might pop up after a hurricane or an extreme event. The committee recommends adoption of the text change unanimously. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any details about what we got into, but it seemed pretty straightforward. We already have emergency shelter zoning rules, and this just expands the details to allow for temporary structures and gives them some standards to go by.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated September 10th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Seeing none? I'm sorry, excuse me, that passes unanimously.
Great.
Moving on to the next item.
The next item we had was TC 624, the Raleigh Waters Public Utility Design Manual Update. And we got in at the very tail end of this process. This has been going on for about 5 years. It's been thoroughly vetted by the Utilities Commission, the Planning Department, the water group in Raleigh, and it's intended to streamline and clarify the requirements for stormwater infrastructure at infill or during development. We had a bunch of good questions. We talked about how it might impact the outcome of different kinds of development and different income brackets or different price strata. Our answers were, we're not a technical group, so we're not really, we don't have the capacity to make technical comments on a water design manual, but all of our questions were given satisfactory answers. And we think the process has been acceptable, and we voted unanimously to recommend adoption. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any question or comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, would you like to make a motion?
Staff's still working on some changes that was requested by the attorney that advises Raleigh Water.
So we need
And
to
so
hold this.
we need to hold this until the 24th.
I'm sorry about that. I was taking notes on something else.
No problem.
That's right. And Mr. York, you reminded me that earlier, so I apologize for not getting it into my notebook. So with that note, I recommend that we hold this at the table until our next meeting on September 24th.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that? Okay.
I move that we
Would you
hold
like
this
to
at
make
the
a motion?
table until our next meeting on September 24th.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay. And any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to old business, we have one item today. That's rezoning case Z824, the Wake 3 plan. At our last meeting, Commissioner Rains asked to be recused from this case, and without objection, I'd like to recuse him again from this meeting. Commissioner Rains, would you like to state the reason again for the record?
Yes, I'd like to be recused as the company I work for is providing professional services.
Thank you very much. You are recused. So Wake 3 was heard at our August 22nd Committee of the Whole meeting, where the committee received a full staff presentation, applicant presentation, and we heard from the public. At that meeting, the committee referred this case to the full Planning Commission with no recommendation in order to continue discussions. We heard that case at our August 27th Planning Commission meeting, and at the end of that meeting, we deferred it to this meeting in order to give the applicant time to submit revised conditions. Our focus today will be on any updates or changes to that case since our last meeting. We'll now turn to Bronwyn Reedus for a presentation on updates on the case.
Thank you. Bronwyn Reedus, Planning and Development. Thanks for the introduction overview. So a revised master plan and application has been submitted since your last discussion, and signatures were received in time to be discussed today. So just to give a high-level summary of the revisions to the master plan, an urban limited frontage was applied to 3009 Newbern Avenue and 3001 Calumet Drive. Retail sales and personal service uses are now permitted by right. The tree conservation plan was revised in accordance with staff urban forestry comments. The utilities plan was revised to show the conversion of public water main to private in Swinburne Avenue, and then additional notes were added in response to staff comments. A transportation phasing plan has been added, and the Sunnybrook Avenue cross-section was provided. And then various minor cleanup adjustments responding to staff comments. So all of these revisions are clouded on the master plan, and you have that draft master plan version in the agenda backup materials. The signed version responding to staff comments or making clerical corrections was received last Friday on September 6th. So just wanted to give you a visual about where that frontage is going to be applied. So on 3009 Newbern Avenue and 3001 Calumet Drive. So that does make those two parcels consistent with the urban frontage guidance. However, no other frontage has been proposed for other areas of the campus. Like I said, we did receive signatures in time for discussion today. I don't want to necessarily call it out as an issue. I just want to highlight that the transportation improvement plan is still under review, and conversations are continuing with transportation staff over that transportation phasing plan. And basically what that phasing plan does is sets thresholds for future development that tell us when certain transportation improvements will be completed within the campus. And you have that draft version in your backup materials to look at for discussion today. Your upcoming meetings are September 10th and September 24th. The applicant team is here to go into greater detail about changes made, but that's the end of the staff overview. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. We may have some. We have already received a full presentation on this. However, given the scope of the new comments, I'd like to see if the applicant would like some time to come to the podium and present those. If so, I would like to, given our agenda today, I'd like to grant an additional 10 minutes to both sides.
All right. Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission. Toby Coleman with Smith Anderson. And with me today on behalf of Wake 3, which is made up of Wake Med, Wake County, and Wake Tech, are Tom Cavender with Wake Med, Jeff Carter with Wake Tech, Mark Forestieri, Mark Edmondson, and Allison Cooper with Wake County, Jamie Schwedler and Mark Frederick with Parker Poe, and Richard Brown and Nathan Romberg with Kimley Horn. Bronwyn did a good job of giving you all the overview. We wanted to just quickly address some of the specific requests that y'all made at the last meeting. So first on frontage, we were asked to look at, basically at the discussion at the last meeting was you understood why A and B didn't have frontage because it's a health facility, educational facility. Y'all asked us to look at C, D, E, and F applying frontage. What we ended up doing was applying urban limited frontage on the two parcels that have frontage along New Bern, which is the BRT corridor. We looked at this parcel in C, which is currently at one medical office building. Basically, what happened there was, the reason we did not end up putting frontage on that is that Wake Med plans to put a second medical office building on it. It will be pushed up against the street with a parking garage in the back, but because the current building doesn't meet frontage standards, we didn't want to go through frankly, the brain damage of trying to figure that one out. On E, that is the Wakebrook mental health facility. It's inpatient care. The reason we didn't do that is there's some significant tree conservation area dedicated along Sunnybrook. And as y'all probably know, when under the UDO, if you put frontage on a parcel and you redevelop that parcel with tree conservation area on the frontage, you have to push the building up and you have to take out the tree conservation area to the extent it conflicts with the build 2 requirements. We didn't want to do that here, and and frankly, in part because if this is ever redeveloped for a non-county, non-medical use, it could not remain in this campus zoning. It would have to be pulled out, at which point the city could put frontage on it. And then in F, sort of similar thought process as E, there's a lot of tree conservation area along the road frontage, and we didn't want to conflict with that. One exception is this area right here, which is the county public health campus. That has already largely been developed under a parking limited frontage. However, again, there's some tree conservation area in this corner, and so we didn't want to create a conflict there. We wanted to preserve the tree conservation area. And given that it's already largely been developed consistent with a frontage, we did not think that would necessarily impact things. Next, we spent some time talking about the greenway easement that runs along the northern side of District E over to this future greenway over here. And if you recall, Parks came in and said, yes, there's an access easement here, but we don't think we can build a greenway in that access easement. We have added a commitment that to the extent the city feels it's necessary, we will provide a greenway, or the county will provide a greenway easement through that area. In addition, there's a little point where the property line jogs, so we've also committed to provide any necessary additional greenway easement there to address those concerns. These are the phasing plans. This is the phasing plan that Bronwyn was mentioning, and as Bronwyn mentioned, we have been in discussions with transportation about it. We made a lot of progress, frankly, on Friday afternoon around 3 o'clock, and so we weren't able to incorporate a lot of the comments into it, but we have had very productive discussions about a majority of these things. Long story short, these three things right here that I just circled are improvements that are triggered by certain events. Transportation has said, we're okay with those. And those are things like when this portion of the private road is built, when this portion of the private road is built, and then removal of this pedestrian-only crossing signal. The two areas where there were some questions about off-site improvements, we've been discussing what the thresholds are, and those two off-site improvements are the improvement of Newbern and Sunnybrook intersection, and then some improvements along Pool Road to the south of this campus. We're basically been just discussing what is the proper threshold and trigger. Is it net additional square footage? Is it average daily trips added, things like that. So we're just working through that with transportation. And then this is our frontage improvement plan. Again, largely working through this with staff. One of the things we talked about a lot at the last meeting was the frontage along Sunnybrook and what kind of pedestrian improvements would go along Sunnybrook. Recall that the city is putting a 12-foot multi-use path along Newbern. So that's what we are proposing, and so we're working with the city to come up with a plan that works for transportation that provides for a multi-use path. Just to address a couple other questions that came up, there was a question about designated paratransit stops and whether whether paratransit stops were in a specific location or whether they were provided door-to-door on the campus. And in talking with my client, Wake Med, the answer is it's door-to-door. And then there was also some requests for both the staff and I think to the applicant to try to get some numbers on number of transit riders here. We have asked for those, and I think we haven't gotten them yet as of this morning. And so with that, we have a large team available for questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we will move on to the opposition. Any opposed to this project will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none again, we can bring it back to the table. Who would like to open us up for questions or comments? Commissioner Otwell?
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Mr. Coleman, I'd like to point out that I hear you keep saying that you're trying to match the city's MUP and your street standards. A lot of people on this commission, I think, are very disappointed that it's only an MUP on Newbern. Personally, we fought on the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission to make it be a separated path. That is the current standard. It has been the current standard in this country for about 20 years. So the fact that we didn't get it on Newbern is disappointing. It's not an excuse for every developer in the future. I'm a little disappointed with the frontage rules. I think that tree conservation is not really a good reason to avoid frontage because you put yourself in your tree conservation bind by allowing it to be measured campus-wide. So you're putting all your trees onto these properties, and now you can't have frontage there. So I don't consider that to be the city's problem. Yeah, those are the things that I really have problems with. I still don't plan on voting for this. And those are my reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Howell, could you clarify on the tree conservation comment?
Tree conservation, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Coleman, is handled campus-wide. So the minimums are now applied not on a per-lot basis, except for the 8-point-something% minimum that's been added. But it allows you to move more tree conservation to some of these other areas and reduce it in some of the bigger areas on the hospital campus. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. If this was a large single property, that's exactly how you do it. But it should not excuse you from other standards.
It should not exceed the frontage standards?
It should not excuse the developer from other standards that the city requires.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to that? Either of those comments?
I agree that it is a frontage, or that the tree conservation standard is campus-wide. I think, again, the consideration particularly for E is that it's an inpatient mental health facility where so long as it remains in the campus, it will remain some sort of medical health facility. There's some existing tree area there. We've designated as tree save, whether you call it a tree save issue or otherwise. That's, we think, is a special case where it's appropriate to do that. And I think even during the discussion at the meeting, at the last meeting, E was sort of thrown in there as something to look at, but not necessarily something that the commissioners were pushing for. In this area, again, this portion of F has largely been developed under a frontage standard. And then the remainder of this area, these areas are already developed, including with the Safe Child House and these sort of areas further to the south in F. The frontage standards, we don't think are as significant as the concerns about frontage and pushing buildings up along New Bern. So that's where we focused.
I agree, but you're not doing much of that on New Bern either.
Well, the only, again, these are the three parcels we have, or the three areas that we have that are fronting New Bern are D, this parcel here, and we've done frontage here and here. This is the area where, again, because those are medical, that's the Wake Med main campus, there's some challenges in meeting the frontage standards there because of existing development and how medical facilities need to be located. So that is an area where we understood that the Planning Commission was not necessarily asking us to look at frontage for subdistricts A and B.
Thank you. Additional comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Fox.
Apologies, I'm going to make you stand back up again. It's a little bit of clarification on the sub-area F. So thank you for considering and adding the frontage on sub-area C and D. I understand the concerns about E, and so I'm going to put that one down. Can you walk me through F again? That's existing tree conservation area, or this is newly proposed tree conservation area, which is affecting the decision or ability?
So this area is largely undeveloped. There's some limited tree conservation area here, but the decision for this area was basically, the frontage standards are a lot about pushing buildings up to the road. We didn't think it was as significant a concern for that portion of F. For this portion of F, that's the county Swinburne Public Health Facility campus. The county had concerns about putting a frontage on it as part of this. And frankly, again, the county has already gotten site plan approval, has already constructed out this campus. And it's done it under existing zoning, which has parking limited on it. So this site has already developed, and it's already developed under a parking limited frontage. So what we're looking at is there any risk in the future to anything if we put an additional frontage on it? And the concern that we came up with was there's going to be tree conservation area, and I'm drawing poorly, but at that corner there. Mm-hmm. And so we did not, if there is some sort of redevelopment that would trigger a building movement, we didn't want to trigger that removal of the tree conservation area because there is a specific provision in frontage that requires you to really pull it close to the corner.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's large existing tree conservation area here. I know that that's not the question, but just point it out to me.
No, that helps me. That actually, that makes a lot of sense. And so if I'm paraphrasing correctly here, there is a development plan that has been recently constructed or is in the process of being constructed. Is that what we're saying?
In the process,
And 2 parking limited standards. And so it is,
yes.
okay. Unlikely that that would redevelop yet again, is
I don't
what I'm
think the county would have
inferring.
plans to do that in
Okay.
at least the foreseeable future.
Okay, so given that, I am then comfortable with the recommendations for frontage as they've been presented. To be honest, it would have been nice in Sub-District A, but I understand the challenges there with the existing topography and the retaining wall that's along that edge and plans for redevelopment. So I'm going to put that one down as well, but thank you for considering that.
Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Peeler?
I'm curious about E. Could you explain again what your plans are for the path? You said there would be a greenway path in addition to or beside the existing county easement on the north side of E?
No, it's going to be over it. So Allison, what was the date? Do you recall? Allison Cooper is Wake County attorney and did a lot of the research here.
Hi. Yes, there's an existing easement across that northern boundary that was dedicated back in the 1960s. It is an access easement. We had discussions with the city attorney's office. We are willing to rededicate it as a greenway easement if that's necessary. The problem with that particular area is the owners to the north, you see their corner actually hits that same easement area. So the wraparound would just come under that if necessary to rededicate on the county property.
So you're just saying it would cut into the, I guess about 3/4 of the way down near the left-hand side of the corner of the
Yes,
property?
the Ripley Station Way owners to the north. Those are apartment buildings.
So you're saying it wouldn't be able to connect through there if there was an actual greenway over it?
It would, yes. We'd be willing to dedicate a completely new easement to the south of that Ripley Station Way property.
There's an existing road easement that runs through there, but not a greenway easement. And so we've worked with the county attorney's office to come up with a condition that because we haven't had time in the last 2 weeks to fully vet and investigate what all could happen inside that roadway easement, that if we're not able legally to build the greenway through that existing roadway easement, the county's going to grant an easement over their property for a greenway so that a greenway connection could be had. If we're able to use the existing roadway easement, then they wouldn't have to grant the greenway easement, if that makes sense. So it was an either-or type of condition just to assure that we're going to get a greenway in there.
Right.
We're just not exactly sure today how we're going to accomplish it based on the status of the current easement and whether a new easement would be required. Does that explain?
Yeah, for sure, thank you. And then I guess the second part of that is the frontage on E. Could we get back to the slide that where it shows the frontage on E? So, I'm sorry, there's so many pieces here. I'm struggling to remember how you presented it, but what, are you recommending any changes different from the frontage on E from the last meeting, from the committee of the whole?
No,
Okay.
no. And again, that's what we determined is because that is a mental health facility, we just didn't see that redeveloping. And number one, we didn't see a redevelopment happening. And if they expanded and added a new building, which is possible within the context of its current use, we didn't think that removing the trees was something that necessarily was appropriate. Wanted to continue to keep it sort of as a have that sort of physical separation.
I think for me, the issue with the frontage on E there along Sunnybrook, and this is what we were talking about in the committee of the whole, is just if there is a connection from the Greenway there eventually made, where does it go to, and how do just leads to Sunnybrook Road?
Well,
and then you're just on Sunnybrook Road without a bike path or any connectivity, safe connectivity over to the main hospital campus or Wake Med.
Well, there definitely will be pedestrian improvements there as it develops. So if there was a new building built there or otherwise triggered, then there would be, you'd basically have to build to the required streetscape, which would include a multi-use path as we've proposed. So we're proposing large multi-use paths on both sides of Sunnybrook that would be built, all the way down Sunnybrook here, and then on this side, through C and then through E. So you would have those large pedestrian and bicycle access ways.
Just not the separated path.
Just not the separated path.
And then, is there anything in that frontage that requires any kind of crosswalk to be built there where Greenway intersects with the street? There or at the intersection down at the private drive where E crosses?
I'm looking at my friends from Kimley Horn. Yeah, not the frontage. I don't know if there's I presume the question is there a situation where it would be appropriate or?
Yeah, just, getting to the other side of the road, basically.
It looks like on your transportation map, there's a pedestrian connection from the private drive across
Right.
Sunnybrook.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we provided for it here. I don't know that there would be a mid-block connection. I think I could go into stories, but there's a signalized intersection here that's going to be removed once Swinburne is extended and a signal is placed here. And the reason that the signalized intersection is here is frankly because people were crossing the street and taking their lives at risk to try to get from one medical facility to the other. So I don't think that there's. I can't speak for transportation. I'm not a transportation engineer. I wouldn't foresee that as being a likely outcome to have sort of a mid-block crossing there.
I'd also like to point out that I bet transportation would agree with the design and potentially removing the Hawk, but I feel that's a degradation in pedestrian experience, having to share an intersection with a bunch of turning vehicles instead of having your own dedicated signal.
Chair Miller, if I
Yes,
might,
Commissioner
I just wanted to clarify one point as we were talking. When I was speaking of frontage, I meant zoning frontage related to the building, not streetscape improvement frontage. So just to clarify, whereas I would like other bikeway improvements along Sunnybrook, I am fine with the zoning designation of frontage for E, or the lack thereof.
Thank you. Additional thoughts from the commissioners? Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the multi-use path. So if I'm understanding what Commissioner Otwell was saying, the standard is for it to be separated, but this case is asking to be exempt from that?
That is correct. We're proposing an alternate street section. It's actually, let's see. This is it right here. And what you can see there is it's a, so you got the multi-use path on either side. And so that's the main difference is the standard street section under the UDO. There's some conflicts there potentially, but the standard street section, what transportation has told us they would tell you is the standard street section would have a separated bike path on it and a smaller sidewalk.
And this is instead a combined bike path and pedestrian path.
Right, and this is instead larger combined multi-use path.
Okay, thank you.
But both are still separated from the street.
Correct, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, there's a planting area between the multi-use path and the street.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions, Commissioner Bennett?
No, thank you.
Any other questions from our commissioners? Then, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Fox, was that? Yes, okay.
Slow. I'm slow today, and my mic's in the wrong spot, so I can't figure out how to talk. Okay, I know, it's weirding me out. Okay. Regarding case Z824, the Week 3 campus, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated September 10th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. Do we have a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion? Then, all those in favor? And that's, looks like 5. Any opposed? That's 2. That motion passes 5-2. Thank you very much. And I believe that Commissioner Otwell has already stated his 2 reasons for his vote against. Commissioner Peeler, would you like to state your reason for the record?
They're pretty much the same as Commissioner Otwell. It's just I'd like to see the separated path as recommended and the other streetscape recommended frontages in there.
Okay. Separated bike path, frontage versus tree conservation. Okay, thank you very much. And we will welcome Commissioner Rains back. Moving on to new business. We have 2 items today. For these items, we will hear a full staff presentation and comments from the public. The first item, E1, is rezoning case Z1724, 4325 Tryon Road. This case is to change approximately 11.32 acres from R1 with Swift Creek Watershed Protection Overlay District to R10 with conditions and with the Swift Creek Watershed Protection Overlay District. And we will now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. So this site is in southwest Raleigh, south of Tryon Road, about 1/2 mile west of the intersection of Gorman Street and Tryon. It's also in the ETJ. And your deadline for action is November 9th, 2024. Nearby zoning includes a variety of residential as well as mixed use. Note that there is a large area of Wake County residential R40W to the south of the site. And here's kind of a zoomed out look of some nearby uses. As you can tell, a lot of the uses south of Tryon are residential, whereas near Lake Dam and Gorman Street to the north, you have some institutional, industrial, and commercial uses. Zooming in a little bit more, the site that we're talking about today is the current location of the Living with Autism daycare, and it's near a residential subdivision that's under construction called Bridle Run to the west. And then north of Tryon is a USPS postal facility, as well as some other commercial uses kind of north and east. Here are 3 views of the site. The first 2 are along Tryon Road, and you can see the location of that daycare. And the third is along an easement that borders the site to the west. So proposed conditions would limit all residential dwelling units, including principal and accessory units, to no more than 6 per acre. And they would also prohibit the apartment building type. So the existing R1 zoning is fairly restrictive as far as residential zoning districts go. R10, which is what they're requesting, is less restrictive. It allows a wider variety of building types, including townhomes. and less restrictive lot sizes and dimensional standards. The site has an average walk score, bike score, and average access to jobs, and it is not served by municipal or regional transit. Here you can see the nearest bus route is about 1 mile east along Tryon, and that's Route 11, Avon Ferry. The request would add to the housing supply, permit a variety of housing types, and allow smaller lot sizes than citywide average, but it does not include subsidized units and is not within walking distance of transit. Area residents are less likely to be either racial minorities or low income compared to the citywide average, and it looks like, although ACS data was incomplete, the cost of rent decreased between 1% between 2020 and 2022, which is lower than the citywide average for a similar period. I wanted to show you, so this site is within the Swift Creek watershed. And so there are a few different policy and development related ordinances related to Swift Creek. So the original Swift Creek agreement goes back to 1987. And there is also an adopted area plan within our comprehensive plan, which is the Swift Creek area, which kind of draws a lot from that LMP. And then, of course, there in the UDO, we have the actual overlay district, which they are maintaining over the site. So I just kind of wanted to draw your attention to the fact that there are kind of a number of different policy documents that are interacting here as far as Swift Creek is concerned. The request is consistent with the future land use maps designation of low-scale residential. And although a portion of Tryon Road does have an urban thoroughfare designation, we can apply zoning frontages to a residential district. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and consistent with the future land use map. Consistent policies include those related to housing and compact development, as well as 3 that are related to water supply and protection thereof, and those are from the environmental policies and public utilities sections, and 2 that are area specific related to density and land use recommendations for Swift Creek. We've identified 1 inconsistent policy with the request, which is related to fire service response time. The site doesn't meet the National Fire Protection Association standards for the arrival of initial full alarm assignment or the arrival of a second company. And just as a reminder, the city began negotiations or signed a contract with Dark Horse, which is a company that's working on the fire service master plan. That began in April, and we're expecting results next spring, early summer. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is November 9th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to the public comment portion. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Just go left and right.
Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Ashton, Longleaf Law Partners, on behalf of Greenwood Homes this morning, the applicant in this case. This feels very close to my face. Sorry. We are here on the rezoning for 4325 Tryon Road. And as Matthew mentioned, the property is 11.32 acres in size total. We'll talk a little bit about Greenwood's plans for this particular property. They are not intending to develop the entire site. There is that existing Living with Autism Center towards the north of the site, and the goal is to keep that there. So we have not been able to finalize where we're drawing that boundary line yet, where we're going to divide the northern portion of the site from the southern portion of the site. But as I mentioned, the intent is for the Living with Autism Center to remain, and then Greenwood Homes will be developing approximately 5 to 7 acres on the south end of the site. We do have frontage along Tryon Road. The current zoning is that R1 with the Swift Creek Watershed Protection Overlay District. The future land use designation is low-scale residential. We are designated as new urban under the Swift Creek Small Area Plan, which we'll talk about more in a minute. And as Matthew mentioned, the urban form map does designate a portion of Tryon Road as an urban thoroughfare. That is helpful for a visual to just show you that this area is intended to be more urban in nature, even though it is located within the watershed. But just based on comp plan guidance, no frontage will be applied to that property. And the proposed zoning we are asking for is R10 with conditions, and we're keeping that watershed protection overlay district. So just a quick overview of what this site looks like. You can see that Autism Center is located to the north. We do have a bunch of commercial and industrial to the north of us as well, closer to I-40. Gorman Street is to the east of us, and then we have the Bridle Run subdivision, which is being under construction currently to our west. This is a little closer up view of the conditions on the site. This site is a challenging site from a topography standard, and then also it's got a ton of, kind of creeks and stream beds, and so there's a lot of things that we're going to have to work through on the subdivision process to make this subdivision of land work. But again, Greenwood Homes is intending just to develop the southern portion of the site. The current zoning is that R1 with that watershed protection overlay district in place. And as you can see around us, the Bridle Run subdivision has received a zoning designation of R10. We are trying to mimic that zoning, also reducing our density to 6 units an acre, just like that neighborhood did. And we'll talk about why that's consistent with the small area plan. And then we also have some R10 to the north of us. The future land use map designation is that low-scale residential. We have added 2 zoning conditions to make ourselves more consistent with that designation, even though we are asking for R10. Specifically, we are capping our density at 6 units an acre. That will include principal units and accessory dwelling units. When we were talking to staff, utilities came back with a comment that recent UDO updates have differentiated now between principal dwelling units and accessory dwelling units for density purposes. Previously, density was density. Whatever unit you put in, whether it was principal or accessory, it would be counted towards a density cap. With recent UDO amendments, that's not the case anymore. So they wanted clarification about when we're capping it at 6 units an acre, are we talking about principal units or accessory units? We said we want it to be both. So whatever goes in there, it will be 6 units an acre, which is consistent with how density was calculated under the Swift Creek small area plan in the past. The other zoning condition, let me just drop back real quick, that we have added to be more consistent with that low-scale residential is we are proposing to prohibit the apartment building type. For low-scale residential in the comp plan, you're supposed to mimic more of what the development pattern is around you. And with the single-family homes, estate homes, and townhomes, we thought it was appropriate in this circumstance to not do apartments. Real quick, again, just this urban form map, just to show you that this area is more in line to be urban in nature, even though it is within the watershed. And here is the Swift Creek Watershed Protection Overlay District map, just to show you which properties are included in that overlay. It's pretty much everything to the east and west of us. This map on the screen right now is from the Comprehensive Plan, Swift Creek Small Area Plan. It does designate our site as new urban. So we are slated for up to 6 units an acre. And that is why we have proposed to do that density cap, to be consistent with this small area plan guidance. This is just a quick summary of the different policy, small area plan, policy statements in the comp plan, just for your information. The one that talks about the up to 6 dwelling units per acre is policy AP-SC3. And this screen here is our 2 conditions that I previously talked about, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have on those. And finally, just the summary screen. I did want to note that staff has found us consistent with the future land use map and with the comprehensive plan overall. And we would ask for your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we will move to the opposition. Are there any opposed to this project? If so, please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Charles Glenn. My wife Jacqueline and I live across the street from the daycare. My sister lives also across the street from the daycare. Tryon Road has historically been a thoroughfare with much traffic. Also, it's been basically a drag strip with driveways. Adding more housing will increase that density. So I speak in opposition to that because right now, the existing road that's right in front, that runs right next to the daycare, right in front of us, basically is a long driveway. People from the Bridle Run community have access to that, and with the addition of the new housing will create basically, will add to basically already a dangerous situation. I speak in opposition because there's no traffic plan. There's nothing to keep people from killing each other. And I've seen a couple of wrecks there. I've been in that one spot my whole life. We've seen it come from country where everybody had basically a small farm or whatever to the area that it is now. I'm not in opposition to growth, but I would like to see it be more managed and more traffic more regulated, because right now it's not. It's the Wild Wild West. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe there's, yes, please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Elise James. I'm a resident of Bridle Run, and we were at a previous meeting where we were informed that the road, the Bridle Run Road, which in between, and it's hard for me to explain it to you, at the end of Bridle Run Road, there is a street that goes, it's a private end to the farm, and it goes out to Tryon Road. And we were told that Bridle Run then would be opened for this new community to drive through. But if there's already a road that's built that goes alongside the autistic center, why wouldn't that road be built out so that the people don't have to just drive through the Bridle Run community? And there was another thought I had, and I can't remember. Oh, we also are concerned with the construction trucks that come and go when this community is being built. How are they going to get to that new community? Are they going to drive through the 44 homes in Bridle Run? So that's one thing that we're concerned about. The other thing is that I know that questions were submitted. We have very, very low water pressure. How is that going to be addressed if there's a new community that's being built and using the same water pressure? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this project? Then seeing none, I'd like to bring it back to the table. Questions and comments from our commissioners. Commissioner Peeler.
I have just a number of questions about the Swift Creek overlay. And I guess just first broadly, all our overlays have different legal power. Does the Swift Creek watershed overlay supersede over everything else in the zoning, the way, say, a TOD would?
I'm sorry, can you repeat whether the overlay supersedes everything
Just
else?
the standard zoning, yeah.
So the Swift Creek Watershed Protection Overlay District applies additional standards that they would have to meet, and those include, let me just read it directly for you.
It's not a regulatory overlay, it's a policy overlay.
Okay.
But we signed an agreement with a lot of other jurisdictions to say that we would all play by the same rules. So while it's not regulatory, it is policy, it still is the sort of the community standard that we historically for that water, for that overlay, and similar to the falls overlay,
Right.
which has a regulatory and policy.
Got it. I can narrow my question a little down a little more. Specifically in the UDO, it mentions with regard to impervious and forestation of lots. So it says, I think it's page 400. It says equal to at least 40% of the of the area set aside for tree conservation, and then for impervious, I believe it states 12. It's a little complicated. Let me get this right. 12% impervious until a maximum in the entire watershed of 153 acres is developed, and then it switches to 12, 30%, and then reverts to 12.
So the management plan is the policy document. The overlay is a zoning overlay, and yes, it is the rules.
Okay.
Yes.
So this would have to have 40% tree conservation essentially, and
Well, forestation.
Forestation.
There's a
Yeah.
difference, yes, sir.
and 12% impervious on
Right.
the total.
That's right.
Total.
Yeah, it also prohibits a couple uses, such as like new landfills and, right, impervious surface and water course buffering, which are tied to forestation and stormwater.
Go ahead. I have one more part of that question, if that's okay. So also in the comp plan for Swift Creek, it says that annexation into Swift Creek overlay, the city does not propose to expand its jurisdiction farther into the basin unless emergency utility extensions require it. So I'm just curious, and I know there's sewer running through the property and water along Trine, so I'm just curious if those got there through emergency annexation and what exactly that means. Or sorry, emergency extension is what it says. I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but I'm just curious how
It says the
how that
city shall
jives
not
with the comp
expand its
plan.
jurisdiction.
Sorry,
I don't have it in front of me, and I apologize.
That's okay.
I try not to memorize these things.
I can read from it if you want me to. It just says the city does not propose to expand its jurisdiction farther into the Swift Creek Basin unless emergency utility extensions require annexation of affected properties or developments.
Well, jurisdiction could include ETJ.
Okay.
And so it's already in the ETJ, so annexation would not be extending the city's at least planning jurisdiction, which it's a planning document, and so I don't know which it's referring to, but it's likely referring to overall planning jurisdiction, which would be the ETJ, and this property is currently in the city's ETJ. So it wouldn't be an expansion of the jurisdiction for planning purposes. It would be an expansion of its corporate limits.
Of its corporate limits, I guess what does qualify an emergency utility extension, though?
That's typically like a failure of a
We
septic
have,
system.
we have,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, Jonathan Ham, Raleigh Water. What constitutes an emergency extension is either a failing well or a failing septic system, and those are defined as a public health risk. So that's what that would be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional follow-up, or Commissioner Fox?
I'm going to shift gears, if
Yes.
that's okay. I had I guess, kind of a transportation-related question. It's more like at site plan question. What looks like right-of-way perpendicular to Tryon Road that Bridle Run dead ends into. I'm I just wanted to clarify, make sure I had this correctly. So at the time of site plan, assuming like a tier 3 site plan, improvements would be required along Tryon and then also this unnamed street on the map. Is that accurate?
Morning, Margaret Tartala, Transportation. So this access way is a private access to that property to the rear of the site, and not public right of way.
Okay, okay.
Any follow-up? Yes.
I'm good.
Oh, no follow-up. Okay, yes, Commissioner Rains.
Thanks, Chair Miller. Following up on that, if it's a private access point, is there any consideration of, I know there's a policy of having 2,500 square foot or 2,500 linear feet of block perimeter. This is 46,000 feet. Is there any consideration of actually tying into the adjacent Bridle Run for connectivity? Has there been any discussions with the city or adjacent owners on that?
Yes. So at the neighborhood meeting, one of the residents was here to talk to you about that conversation. Bridle Run subdivision was developed with public rights of way. So those were always intended to be cross connection points. If you look at where the stub to Bridle Run Drive is made, it was intended to extend into this property. So we do have, immediately adjacent to us, there is that skinny strip of private roadway. There is a access easement over the top of it that gives us the right to use it. The intent right now, and this is all driven by stormwater retention issues, a lot of this is going to be worked out at the site plan subdivision plan phase. The intent right now is to construct on that private roadway up and until Bridle Run Drive, and turn that into a public right-of-way and dedicate that to the public. We do have permission from the property owner that owns that private right-of-way to do that. So there will be up to half of that private strip turning into a public right-of-way. It will run into Bridle Run Drive. The hope is at some point in the future when the Autism Center comes in to redevelop, at some point in the future, at that point, the remainder of that connection to Tryon Road will be made. The concern right now with building that private strip all the way from the south, all the way north to Tryon, is it will wipe out the daycare. There is no stormwater solution for that impervious area to be added. So we're trying to be sensitive to the fact that there's an existing very good autism center on site and trying to not destroy their existing use, because the only place to locate stormwater for that extension of the road all the way to Tryon is to put it on the daycare site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional follow-up on that topic? Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Lampman?
Just some clarifying questions. So is the intention to subdivide after the rezoning? And then can you just repeat, did I hear clearly that there is not an intention to pave down to the stub and then pave the, I understood that there is a connection that's going to be built from Bridle Run that's going to extend into, but maybe not necessarily pave the easement down to Bridle Run.
That's correct. That's correct. Just because of the stormwater issues out there right now and trying to find a place to retain the extra water that would be running off that extra north-south piece.
Okay.
But the goal is, Bridle Run is supposed to, just based on the stubs of how it was developed, it's supposed to run through the middle of our site, and we're supposed to stub to our east. So eventually, Bridle Run will be connecting through multiple properties.
So the residents of the future townhomes would actually come in through the Bridle Run access and the Brisk Gallop Way access?
Yes, until the daycare facility at some point in the future redevelops, and then through that redevelopment process, that roadway would hopefully be, the Tryon Road piece would hopefully, that connection would be made.
Okay, so just going through Google Maps and the drive-by, it does look like it's quasi road, like kind of dirt, not fully paved out. What would prevent future residents from using that as an access point, even though it may not be a safe roadway?
It is currently private access. I mean, it is an easement that is available to these residents. It already exists. It's just private. Who maintains that? I understand what you're saying. Currently, right now, it is paved right off of Tryon Road and into the daycare parking lot. South of that, it's gravel, and then further south of that, it becomes dirt. Where we're going to be paving, I'm not quite sure if there's still gravel or if it's dirt. We're going to be taking care of a lot of that dirt issue just with the portion that we're going to be developing out.
Okay. On this particular topic,
And we
there's
can
still
work.
some outliers, but I don't
Sure.
have any follow-up questions unless my fellow commissioners.
And just one other thing to add, as the site is coming in for preliminary subdivision and SPR approval, our engineer will work with transportation staff if they think some kind of safety directional, signage needs to be placed there, to direct residents to the right entry point. We can definitely have that conversation with transportation.
Commissioner Rains.
Yes, thanks. Just a quick follow-up. One of the comments was the emergency response time not meeting the NFPA. Is it your understanding that this private access road would be used by emergency personnel, or would they have to go through Bridle Run to get to the site?
We haven't not had those conversations yet, just because fire access is usually a site planning issue, an annexation issue. I mean, we're happy to have that conversation with them as we work through the process. But I mean, their main points. Main points are going to be Brisk Gallop Way and Bridle Run Drive, and usually they require 2 points of access. Was my understanding, and that provides the 2 points of access for fire.
Thank you for clarifying. I didn't know if that was part of the reason why it didn't meet the requirement.
I think staff has just been including that now when you're in one of these fire response time issues, just as a matter of course, as just bringing it to your all's attention. My understanding is the way City Council has been handling it is they'll address it during the annexation process.
Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bennett. Vice Chair Bennett, excuse me.
Thank you. So I just want to acknowledge the comments and the concerns from the members of the public. It seems like these are issues that would be handled during site plan and not in zoning conditions. So I just want to encourage you to remain involved and to keep your issues at the forefront with transportation and, working out like construction vehicles and that type of thing. Those wouldn't be handled here. They'd be handled later. So make sure you stay involved. I also typically don't like zoning conditions that prohibit apartments. I typically say that. So because I typically say that, I just want to say I also appreciate blending in with your surrounding and being consistent with what's around you. So in this instance, I do think the prohibition is okay with me. So I just wanted to say that because I do typically speak out against prohibiting apartments. So with those things said, I'm okay with this.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
I have a follow-up question. Some of the applicants said, I believe you said the city sometimes interprets total units, just principal units being separate from accessory units. So I guess my question is actually for staff, is that if they say 67 units limited in their conditions, will it be interpreted as all units including accessory legally, or will it be interpreted by the city later as simply principal?
We ran this by the utilities department, the intent, and I think utilities agreed with our language. It's any unit that goes on this property will be counted towards density. So if it's a principal unit, it will be counted, and if it's an accessory unit, it will be counted. And the reason that this was brought up is just because when the Swift Creek Small Area Plan, it's an older area plan, when it was doing its recommending guidance of up to 6 units an acre for these new urban sites, it was including any units. Since that time, council has had a lot of discussions and has passed text amendments to pull out ADUs from traditional density calculations, but that didn't change this small area plan. So we're trying to be consistent with the intent of the small area plan, which was to include any unit. But Utilities Department did review this language with us, and they did not have any further comments.
Okay.
Commissioner Lampman.
I do have a follow-up on the utilities discussion. There was one comment about water pressure, and this may be best suited for someone from utilities to discuss about potential flow or how this might be impacted. I understand some of the comments here from fellow commissioners, but just wanted to understand the particulars of this area as it becomes more dense. Is it going to require additional infrastructure build out for you all, or what the impact is for this particular unit on
Sure.
your?
So for the Bridle Run community, I'm looking into what the public said earlier. See if we can try and address that. This proposed subdivision that would come on this lot would probably make their own independent connection out to the Tryon Road water line, and potentially would be able to interconnect back through Bridle Run, similar to the streets. And that should take care of any concerns there from a water pressure standpoint. But again, I'm looking into the other concern that was raised. Yep.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just want to say I'm torn on this particular case because I try to stay consistent with my comments here, and I generally don't like annexing into an area that's not in our corporate limits, especially when there's no affordability involved. There's no public transit access close to this. I do really appreciate the applicant sticking with the rules of the area plan, because often we see that not happening when it first comes to planning commission. Yeah, I just want to say I'm not sure if I can support this one just because I want to stay consistent with not annexing. I have a lot of trouble with Raleigh's corporate limits spreading into areas that are car-centric, but I do appreciate your effort to stay with the Swift Creek overlay. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett?
The staff report says this is not accompanied by a request for annexation.
But it would require that to be hooked up to utilities, correct?
If it hooked up to utilities, but, and I don't know, they couldn't do a private system here, or could they, John?
The intent is to come in for an annexation at a later point in time once all of the subdivision and SPR issues have been worked through with staff. But yes, an annexation will be required before we are able to get building permits for this site.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts from our commissioners? Commissioner Fox?
I have some concerns about improvements that would be required on that private drive. However, I do believe, just to reiterate what Commissioner Bennett said, many of these things are going to be solved at the site plan level. So at this point, I'm comfortable moving forward with this one.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Raines, or no?
No questions.
Commissioner Bennett?
Sorry, I do have a question now. I wasn't thinking about the annexation. So the fire service issue, if the area is annexed, then we are expanding the Raleigh service area. Is that correct?
Yes. So currently, I believe the site is, closest responder is either with Wake County or with Cary. I can double check right now for you. So there's an overlap in responses in areas like this that are either not directly in a fire service zone or is closer to another adjacent jurisdiction's fire response zone. But if it were to be annexed at a later date, yes, it would fall within Raleigh's fire response zone.
In which organization is servicing Bridle Run and the adjacent neighborhoods?
It's the city of Raleigh.
Okay, so they're already going out there.
I do want to, yeah, just to kind of give you all some assurance, understanding that the fire response times, there are these technical requirements that are not being met. However, we are surrounded by corporate limits. So the city of Raleigh is already serving this area. It's not like they're going to just hop over this property and not provide service. They're already there.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Any other comments or thoughts? With that, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Raines?
Thanks, Chair Miller. For case Z1724, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated September 10th, 2024, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-1. Thank you very much. 7-1, excuse me. And Commissioner Peeler, you've already generally stated your reason. Is there anything you'd like to add for your reason for your vote against, for the record?
Yeah, I mean, just in addition to what I said, also concerns with fire coverage can be added.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to our next item, under new business, E2, the Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 324, the Capital Area Greenway Master Plan. This is a city-initiated request to amend the 2030 Comprehensive Plan, proposing changes to Section 8, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space to reflect the goals and recommendations of the Capital Area Greenway Master Plan. And we'll turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning again. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. Yes, this is a request to bring the 2030 Comprehensive Plan into better alignment with the recently adopted Capital Area Greenway Master Plan update. It would change, lots of changes contained within Section 8, which is the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space section of the Comprehensive Plan, and it would apply to subsections 8.1, 8.3, and 8.5. So they would change some existing policies and existing actions. They would add new policies and new actions, and then they suggest a couple map changes. And your deadline for action is a little bit longer this time since it's a comp plan amendment. It's December 9th. So just to give you a background of the Capital Area Greenway Master Plan, it's a policy document to help staff, stakeholders, and elected officials in implementing the Capital Area Greenway program. It was adopted in 1976 and then updated again in 86, 89, and most recently in 2022. So that last update in 2022 was started in 2020 and had 3 distinct phases of public engagement. So I'll go over these changes fairly briefly, and if you have questions about specific policies, we can also get into more detail a little bit later on. But there are 12 existing actions that are proposed to be changed, and they are almost all related directly or indirectly with greenways and or open space corridors. Here's the first 6 of them. Here is the second 6 of those. And as far as all new actions, Park staff is proposing 2 new actions, the first of which is related to the lighting of greenway trails, and the second is related to flood monitoring. Since there is a direct overlap of many greenway corridors over these open space corridors, they're often near streams or rivers that feature deep slopes, a lot of environmental concerns nearby, and so one of the actions here is related to monitoring floods in those areas. As far as policies, there are 8 existing policies that that are recommended to be changed by this comprehensive plan amendment, and one of the changes to one of the policies that we already have, which is 3.8 multimodal integration, would be to change that from a regular typical policy to a key policy. And key policies, as you all know, are policies that have impacts as far as determining consistency of rezoning requests. And they're also proposing 9 new policies, one of which is also a key policy related to resilience and ecosystem services. And just to reiterate, among the changes would be 2 new key policies, that multimodal integration and resilience and ecosystem services. Another one of the major changes that park staff is proposing is to remove the existing map PR3, greenway corridors and connectors. And the main reason for that is to split it up into 2 maps that show the same information, and then some. So the first new map would be map PR3, Greenway Trail Map, which shows prioritized trails, proposed trails, and existing parks within Raleigh's system, as well as adjacent trails that are recommended in nearby jurisdictions. And this map here on the right, figure 15, is directly taken from the Capital Area Greenway Master Plan update. The second of the map changes would be adding a new one called map PR4, which shows open space corridors to be added to the comprehensive plan. And so this has existing open space corridors proposed, and then also those park locations, as well as trails in adjacent jurisdictions. There are a lot of consistent policies for this request, and they span a wide variety of different sections of the comp plan. So I'm just going to kind of skip ahead, but if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. There's a total of 36 that are located in the land use section, environmental protection, transportation, parks and recreation section, more parks and recreation section, the community services section, as well as urban design and arts and culture, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them are even from our implementation and internal implementation chapter. Staff did not identify any inconsistent policies with the request, and there are no outstanding issues. Your deadline for action is December 9th. You have a variety or a number of PC meetings coming up, so please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in support of this comp plan amendment? Then seeing none, we can move to the opposition. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak against? And seeing none, we can bring it back to the table for any comments, questions, discussion from planning commissioners. Do we have any comments? Yes, Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you. I think this is a great comp plan update, text change. Been looking forward to this for a long time. I especially like to see the consideration of adding lighting along strategic corridors. I'm just really pleased with the way that this policy addresses the priorities within our comp plan. Did have a couple questions. The scoring criteria for priority potential greenway trails, is the scoring criteria made public? I don't think I saw it in the packet, but I could have missed it.
It's not included in the packet, but there is extensive documentation of the prioritization in the actual 2022 Capital Area Greenway Master Plan document.
Thank you. And the other thing I was hoping to see was a mention of expanding operating hours to promote multimodal transportation. And I know that that was part of what was discussed in the steering committee for the Greenway Master Plan. I was wondering if there was any consideration of adding any language of that to this policy update.
I will defer to Parks to answer that.
Yeah, I think that's in there. We kind of have one general one that's kind of revisit the operations and kind of make sure it aligns with the update.
I believe that's PR 3.21.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can go back and see
So like, yeah, and I thought it would be great to stick in some language there. It talks about implement operational changes to existing guidelines, policies, and codes for the Greenway network to position Greenway trails as an essential transportation option. And I think that that could be interpreted to include extended operating hours, but it would be nice to see an explicit mention of it. But I intend to vote for this anyway, so thank you.
I think in our draft documents, we kind of had like an EG hours of operations and kind of took it out, but.
Thank you. Was that Commissioner Fox?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not really sure who to direct it to. Rick, I appreciate seeing the addition of greenway-oriented development included as well. to pull a Commissioner Otwell. That's PR 3.13. But I guess my question is really high level in how that policy being adopted might impact the work that we do here, or might influence that.
Can you repeat that policy number?
I think it's 3.13. PR 3.13. Yeah. There you go. There you go. As a key policy, yes.
Yes, and most of our changes to the existing policies and action items is an update to the language. Instead of calling them greenway corridors, we're now calling them open space corridors. People tend to think of the trail infrastructure when we say greenway, and that's not quite what the corridors themselves are, more about riparian protection. So that's what I would think would be the change in this policy and the bumping it up to a key policy.
Thank you. And I just, the question, it might be a Bynum question. It's kind of a really high-level question. I'm going to apologize for asking it without giving you a heads up, but I'm going to do it anyway. How might we see that policy show up or not show up in a zoning case to show consistency or... And the touching at the edges of why I'm asking it is... I don't know that I know it's sufficient enough until you tell me that answer. Does that help?
Sure.
Okay.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page, what the policy says is that development adjacent to or encompassing a designated greenway corridor or greenway connector should provide links between internal pedestrian infrastructure and the greenway network where appropriate. The development should proactively respond to greenways as an amenity, incorporating and maintaining greenway view sheds and aesthetic character, as well as stormwater management and flood control benefits. So without UDO regulation, the way you would expect to see that show up in a zoning case would be in voluntary conditions offered in response to this policy. I don't know if Parks is in conversation with zoning administration about related text changes that go with this.
Yes, that is in process, but this is moving a little faster.
That helps me. That's exactly where I was going with it.
So
Thank you.
I think the expectation is that we would have both, some, where possible, regulatory expectation, setting some standards about what those connections might look, does it have to be a 6-foot wide pedestrian? Does it have to be a multi-use path? What does it have to, just what is the menu there? But then some of these other things around view shed and aesthetic character, you and I both know we can't regulate that. So that's going to be, what do applicants offer voluntarily? So like in the request we saw this morning from Wake 3, where they had Greenway, they're putting in a dedication. But then you might also expect to see a condition that acknowledges, and we've seen, Parks has been working with applicants recently where we're seeing conditions that make connections between the internal pedestrian network of the site to the adjacent greenway. So we might be seeing more conditions like that. I think also we might see some movement in regulation around frontage relation. We might have a conversation about how frontage is applied to, I don't want to call it greenway right-of-way, but for lack of a better term.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I look forward to the future regulatory changes that might come out of this. With that, I'm very excited about this and ready to support it.
Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I'm excited too. This is great. So I'm fully prepared to support it. I just had a couple of questions about some of the wording. One of them was PR 3.16, since we're being specific. This may be similar to what Commissioner Fox just asked, because it just seemed a little odd to me, that second sentence says preference is given to development and site management approaches that reduce the risk and impacts of natural disasters and climate change. Like preference is given, what does that mean? And why doesn't it just say development and site management approaches should reduce the risk and impacts of, it just seemed like an odd wording.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to some slight rewording, some tweaking if you guys think that it makes for a stronger policy, I think.
Okay, I didn't know if it was like a legal thing but it seemed like the other policies were written in that language. It should, so I mean, this isn't gonna make me not vote for it, but I'm all for strong language. The other one, it was the very next one, 3.17. It says new development along designated open space corridors or greenway corridors should be required to construct. And the other policies seemed like they read should construct. And that one just said should be required. And I mean, it's should construct it or it's required to, but.
This one, I'm less certain if we can, what we're allowed to tweak with the wording, because I know as we're going through the UDO text changes for developer-built trails, that's a lot of, sensitive footing to kind of navigate that. So I think this is trying to, get at that we want to encourage it in rezonings and those voluntary, but I'm not sure if we can outright in this policy say it's required at this point.
It's a policy statement. It should never say something's required, okay? So should build or should be required to build is somewhat similar. It doesn't say shall build.
Right. I think my question, should be required seems odd. It either should or it's required. If we can't require it, then why not? The word requires is throwing me off. Because if it's coming before us to show consistency, and I'm looking at a policy that says it should be required, then that's what I'm going to hold. Well, the policy says you should be required to, so then you should. I don't know why the word required is in there if we can't require them. Couldn't it just say should construct? Like the other policies say should do this and should do that?
That sounds like a good tweak to me.
I would think that would be a decent tweak, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I had. I think this is great. Thank you.
Great. Well done. Commissioner Raines.
Quick question. Speaking of numbers, policy PR 3.20, fee in lieu. This policy says investigate developing a fee in lieu. I guess the question is that a policy or should that be an action? If it's, is it a policy to have the option for fee in lieu, or is it something that the city is still wanting to study? So I'm just throwing that out as a question. This is always kind of tricky. If you give the developer an option, they're going to take it later on, right? So I wonder if there's a way to investigate as an action and then tighten up whatever that result is so that it still encourages good green development.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Any other thoughts, comments on the language? Those all seem like great comments. Yeah. And perhaps we could hold that at the table and see that next round of comments at our next meeting or whatever those are available to appear on our next agenda. I think it would need to be in by this Friday, or is there wiggle room for comp plan amendments? It need to be in by this Friday, any of those changes, in order to appear on our 24th meeting, or it could appear on a later agenda. Do you have any preference about whether it appears on our September 24th meeting agenda or September 8th? Oh.
So there's not really a mechanism in the code to amend a comp plan amendment request.
Okay.
And so I think from a process lens, it might be more helpful if the Planning Commission were to make a recommendation with some suggested changes. So while the applicant can't make a change, you can recommend a revision, and council can act on a revision that you propose or that staff were to propose. I think that might be and so what I heard was we requested 2 to be removed from 3.17 and then to convert, what was that, 3.20 fee in lieu to an action instead of a policy?
I think-
3.17 revisions and 3.2 to an action. Could you say that into the mic just for the future video?
So 3.16 and 3.17 revisions, and then changing 3.20 to an action.
I think if Parks is acceptable to the changes, they could actually change the comp plan draft rather than it having to go forward as here's what we originally created and here are all the edits the planning commission suggests. It sounded like that's what you were suggesting. That's why it seems like if there are certain edits staff is amenable to, they could go ahead and make those, highlight them at the next
That's right.
meeting.
Okay.
But they don't have to do it by Friday, is what I was getting at. It's not a zoning condition where you have to get your unsigned conditions in by Friday. Staff's the applicant, staff's also the reviewer, and so we can work together to, their deadline's the agenda, I would think. So, but
Gotcha.
if
That was my first
they
question.
want to incorporate changes.
So I would be fine to either hold it here to make those changes and vote it out, or to make a motion to vote it out with those proposed revisions.
That's what I was
What's
going to
the will of the
say.
commission? Yeah.
I mean, staff seems fine with it, so I'm fine sending it on with those proposed conditions, proposed changes.
Great.
Yeah.
That seems to be the will of the commission. Good with me, too. Any other comments? Then would someone like to make a motion to that end? Yes, Commissioner Fox.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of CP 324 Capital Area Greenway Master Plan as it is reasonable and in the public interest and supported by a number of comprehensive plan policies, including placemaking, helping communities, and coordinating transportation investments and land use. Along with that, I recommend the changes made as discussed at the table regarding PR 3.16, 3.17, and 3.20.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further comment? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to approval of the minutes, we have 2 sets of minutes. First from our August 22nd Committee of the Whole meeting, and next from our August 27th Planning Commission regular meeting. Are there any comments to the minutes? Then I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Commissioner McCrimmon has seconded. Any comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. On to other business. Report of the chair. I have 3 items. The first one, our next meeting, I believe we have an early stop at 11 o'clock. Is that correct?
We anticipate that we may have an early stop at 11. We will be able to confirm after the 17th.
Okay, understood. So we will let you know before that meeting, but just have an eye on that. It'll probably be listed in our agenda if we're going to end early. The second one is our annual retreat. Every year we have a planning commission retreat, and we're currently in the process of developing the schedule and agenda for that item. If any of you has any ideas about topics or goals for the retreat, please let me know. And the third, I wanted to draw everyone's attention to an News and Observer article from 3 days ago that had some good and welcomed news that reflects some of the real-world impacts, positive impacts of some of our work on this commission over the last 3 years, or several years. The article is titled "Near Double-Digit Drops as New Supply Hits the Market, Triangle Rents Keep Falling." The News and Observer published a related article on June 1st that's also worth reading. They report that over the past several years, we have approved and developers have delivered tens of thousands of rental units to our city, which have directly caused the median rental prices to fall double digits throughout our city. And this year, despite higher interest rates, Raleigh is set to deliver an additional 6,400 rental units to the market, so the prices are likely to fall further. And what I found particularly interesting, the majority of the new construction is Class A amenity-rich apartments. However, this increase in supply is putting pressure on Class B and Class C buildings to price competitively, which is directly causing rental prices to fall across the affordable housing affordability spectrum for our housing as well. And I know as planning commissioners, I know every single one of us shares the same goal of tackling our city's housing crisis for all of our citizens, addressing both our market rate and our affordable housing crisis. And we're invested in understanding all of the levers that we have to really move the needle and make a big impact towards achieving those goals. So I've spoken with staff when we're talking about our retreat this year to potentially explore looking at some of the data and explore how adding to our rental housing supply has impacted rental housing prices across both the affordable and market rate housing spectrum. So that's the bit of good news for me. And with that, I'll move down the line.
No updates.
Thank you.
For the Infrastructure and Mobility Committee, the meeting on September 26th, we do not have one. We don't have items for discussion. So with that.
We have a text change committee meeting planned for next week, Wednesday the 18th. And right now, I'm not aware of whether we have anything on the agenda or not. I have not heard.
You definitely have co-living.
Co-living.
And I feel like there's one more. Yep.
Excellent. So we have an agenda, and we will have a meeting next Wednesday at 4 p.m. For those on the text change committee, can we get a head count and see who's going to be able to make it?
Just put it on the calendar.
All right. Three is quorum.
So.
Four, nice.
Single room occupancy or co-living and the 2024 omnibus.
Ooh, all right. Thank you.
Dig in.
Vice Chair Bennett.
Looks like there's nothing for Committee of the Whole for September 26th. Okay, so that's, so
Okay.
no Committee of the Whole meeting on September 26th.
Good news.
Our next strategic planning committee meeting is October 9th, where we are reviewing NCOD topics, new committee membership, Bennett, Mann, McCrimmon, Miller, just a quick head count. That's October 9th again for potential quorum purposes. If you will be there or not be there.
I'll be there. October 9th.
Nice. Yes. I know that's way out in the future. I think we're good on 3. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
No report.
No report, but I'll get back to you on October 9th.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Moving on to report of the Assistant Director.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, with that, we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we are adjourned.